Ella. This is very strange for me to not have a martini glass in my hand while I address a group of people. I've got about 10 minutes that I'm going to do my introduction, which is 2.5 of the first 3 songs of ABBA Gold, but I have decided instead I'm going to talk about my letter on liberty. First of all, though, I think it's important to talk about what drag is. A drag queen's mission, and it's important to say this just for clarity, a drag queen's mission is to entertain, not to satisfy a kink. If it is to satisfy a kink, then we're not really talking about drag so much as transvestism, and while I could say a lot about that, it's not my area of qualification. So let's remember that while a drag queen's impetus for taking to the stage is certainly attention-seeking, it is not exhibitionist. Further, it's important to remember that a drag queen isn't pretending to be a woman, not exactly. You know, no one would go to a drag show if it weren't in the knowledge that what they're seeing is smoke and mirrors. What they're watching is folly and farce. Drag is not a deceit, drag is a conceit. And I say that the conceit doesn't mock women so much as it mocks all of us. It mocks identity, and it reveals and often revels in human pomposity. Now, what do I mean? Well, I've always felt like a good drag performance should take on all the characteristics of playing a game of masks and illusion in which the performer is doing a kind of kabuki dance. They'll oscillate between the presented persona and the reality that the whole thing is actually just a joke. So some people find this perceptual gear shift quite jarring and uncomfortable, jumping between the committed performance and the wink, wink, nudge, nudge of it all. You know, there's always, like, imagine you're at a family 50th and they've booked a drag queen. I think you're going to be familiar with the person that I'm talking about. There's always a person who, when the drag queen's, you know, making fun of Uncle John and singing the song and doing a bit of mock flirting with someone, there's like a particular genre of heterosexual man who feels it's very important to say, "He better not come anywhere near me." I think that this person's kind of afraid of what the dynamic says about them. And in these moments, we see that this person is a poor, unfortunate soul. They've come to the party, but they haven't come to play. Games obviously work within an established framework, and the framework of drag posits identity as being fundamentally frivolous. And that's why this self-serious gentleman doesn't get it. In my letter on liberty, I explore some of the subsets of drag, and I don't have time to go into too much depth of them all right now, but I'll give you a whistle-stop tour of some drag archetypes that will probably get me in trouble with my fellow professionals. We're all familiar with the classic British drag queen, or as I like to call them, the pig in the wig at the end of the pier. So this is usually a tattooed bloke, they're in a sequin gown, they're in a Brighton cabaret bar, and they are murdering I Am What I Am. I'm thinking of my friend Cosmic. But if you catch Cosmic at the Queen's Arms on a Thursday night, you will find that she's absolutely hilarious. I mean, a mistress of ceremonies who brings everyone out of their shells. That's what that drag is doing. And there is a trigger warning for this, because that type of drag is bawdy. It is highly suggestive, acid-tongued. I mean, it's often just outright explicit. And it's adult humor. But what about celebrity Big Brother contestant Courtney Act? She's an Australian drag queen, and her feminine illusion is part of the aspect of her work that people know her most for. It's the part that's the most beguiling, I think. It's all a bit Barbie, and it's a bit Disney princess drag. Or my friend Kitty Scott-Claus from RuPaul's Drag Race. Now, she's she's plumptious and silly, a slightly Bridget Jones-esque persona, very bubbly, very campy, but her humor isn't really too ferocious, it's not too eviscerating. I always think that she'd be quite at home on the Loose Woman panel. So that's why I call this Holly Willoughby drag. Now we can go far left afield from that into the psychedelic shaman drag of David Hoyle and his fellow avant-gardists, or the foul-mouthed, foam-wigged, cartoonish Aussie drag of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. The RuPaul supermodel of the world drag, or there is my personal favorite, the towering Athena-like, late 20th century, elegant, ethereal, angelic, sonic, songstress beauty type modeled for you all now. By me. Of course, as well, there is the pantomime dame we're familiar with, the widow twanky drag. But there is one specific subgenre of drag, and I think this is the one that sticks in the craw of some feminist detractors of drag, which is the Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, kind of, I affectionately call them the pop sluts, the coyote ugly drag queens, the stripper drag queens. Now, I always joke that every drag queen on their journey to get to wherever their creative vision takes them has probably gone through a stripper phase. And I think that's partly to do with that there is a maximalism of sexually provocative attire, so picturing corsets and fishnets and all that kind of stuff. These are attention-grabbing garments. But they also maximize the attention on the performer without requiring of the performer an enormous amount of talent. It's also because it costs less. I mean, drag is quite expensive, could you imagine? Fishnets, etc., are the cheap choice for the beginner drag queen. So it's kind of like a starter kit for drag. And above all else, these queens are modeling their style on the dominant icons of the cultures in which they were raised. So I'm thinking, for my generation, Madonna, Janet Jackson, then after that, you know, Britney Spears, Pussycat Dolls, and then after that, whatever the fuck they're listening to now. So those were and still are the glam icons for generations of young girls, for generations of young gay men. And if you go back to the 1970s, you'll find that the drag bars were full of Barbra Streisand impersonators or Diana Ross impersonators, and most of them were in floor-length gowns, and the sexually flirtatious visual aspect wasn't at the forefront of that drag in the same way. Now, I don't want to throw the stripper drag queens under the bus, because there actually are some like beautiful, talented, this is a disclaimer by the way, some beautiful, talented performers out there who delve into those themes and take it to an aesthetic height. Alexis St. Pete, my friend Honey Fox. So there are people that do that and look $1 million. But I think that that's the kind of drag that's being particularly controversial at the moment. Now, why do I bring all these subgenres up? It's because whether you're a gender clown or a warrior princess or a glamazon fashionista, the point I'm trying to make is that drag is a broad church. And criticisms of drag usually fail to make the distinction between these different types. The shallow or the passing observer, or an American Republican legislator, might consider drag's appeal to foremostly be of a prurient interest. They see gaudy and racy attire, the type worn by our cultural stars like Beyonce and Miley Cyrus. They see this and they flatten all down into a low-resolution image of drag as a whole. If you want to know where reasonable misunderstandings develop into fully fledged hostility, it's right there. It's in the place where the racier embodiments of drag are used to denigrate the entire art form. So do I think that drag queens dressed like baby prostitutes are the best ones to be reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar to children? I do not. But it makes me sad that in recent chatter on the subject, the subject has been we've excluded the richness of drag from the debate, and people have purposely characterized these drag queen storytime style events as children being drop-kicked into the clutches of scantily clad pedophiles. Now, it might sound grandiose, but like rock stars, I believe that drag queens reach for representations of the divine. So I borrow in my shows as much from Meat Loaf, Steve Tyler, and Freddie Mercury as I do from Maria Callas, Shirley Bassey, Celine Dion. Drag worships incredible talent and unattainable beauty. Earlier this year, I was on Piers Morgan's show, and I was debating a US culture warrior, Lauren Chen, who described drag as woman face. And it was interesting to me because I feel like drag has less to do with the woman on the street than some critics seem to wish that it did. I always feel like drag is a mirror held up to our celebrity constellation. And that's why you'll very rarely see a drag queen contort themselves for hours in hair and makeup to look like their Aunt Janet. Now, drag excludes the ordinary. Drag is interested in excess, both because it worships it and because it's amused by it. The woman face argument to me seems like a reflexive retort which shares some DNA with the perpetually offended types who the right-wing pundits are usually telling to get a grip. So, honestly, our identitarian moment, it exhausts me. You know, people seem more glued than ever to their masks and their characters and their identities. And a fixation with identity, I think it drags people into categories that sometimes separate us rather than connect us. So if you're looking for an ardent proponent of the religion of 1,000 genders, I'm not it. I do, of course, have non-binary friends whose creative and inventive reflections on gender I find interesting from an artistic and philosophical perspective, but I don't have much time for political and legislative wrangling on the matter. I feel like the grasp for recognition from clerics of the state leaves creatives frustrated, and I think it's a waste of their gifts. I think that non-conforming minds are best commissioned with the creation of beautiful, inspiring, or even just entertaining work. Non-conforming minds provide a service to society when they give us some existential relief from the grey, dull drudgery of our mundane lives. A true drag queen acknowledges that there is a Puritan dislike of mirth and laughter, and that the very moral pomposity which drag serves to disarm. By the way, some drag artists are often just as guilty as their critics on Twitter of this moral pomposity. That is not lost on me. But look, not all drag can be great, and not every creative choice is the right choice. In fact, I would argue that with drag, let's be honest, half the fun of it is that it is often completely crap. 10 pints in when you're wearing your knickers on your head, singing "Gimme, Gimme, Gimme" a Man After Midnight at 2 in the morning, and the drag queen is still going, it doesn't really need to be good anymore. Do you know what I mean? So as I say in my letter on liberty, while drag can provide you with much to think about, it's not advisable to overthink it. A true drag queen is unfazed by the rabble outside protesting men in dresses. A drag queen may sympathize with concerns, but fearless artists do not capitulate to them. As my personal idol, Bette Midler, once said, fuck 'em if they can't take a joke. Thank you.
Thank you very much.